Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Bircher, Director of Technical Services here at CTC, and today we are going to discuss a product called Ally from the CTC Nexus Suite. And basically we're just going to go over the best practices and how to get it set up to be as efficient as possible and kind of get you all the tips and tricks, when to do things, when not to do things, how to do things, all the fun stuff. Before we get into any of that though, a couple things I want to point out. Please ask questions if you have any using the questions panel. If you're attending the live presentation today, I will be monitoring those and answer them as I go when it makes sense, and then I'll take time at the end to recap those and answer anything else that I missed. If you're watching our recorded version on our YouTube channel, which should be there shortly after this is completed, I will be monitoring those as well. Use the comment section and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can with answers to those questions. Now we'll get going. Okay, so we did a webinar not too long ago talking about Ally and kind of giving you the base core introduction on how the product works. So I'm piggybacking off that today, and we're just going to show you everything, kind of explain how to set it up in the best way possible based off what's there and how to get the most bang for your buck. And effectively, so that's basically what the webinar is talking about today. And, so for those of you that aren't familiar with what Ally is, it helps you manage your projects and your users a little bit more than what traditionally you've been able to do. If there are certain things that you want to know is happening and when it's happening, we can track that information. If you want to provide some additional training mechanisms for your users, Ally can provide that. If you wanted to do some core prevention of certain things, Ally can provide that as well. So we're going to kind of give you an overview of what Ally does and then show you how to best set that up in your environment. So today, after I do kind of a quick overview, we're going to get into generating rules and rule sets for commands and for objects, show you how that works. And then we're going to go ahead and discuss how the projects are set up and how to best incorporate project-based information into your setup so that you're not stumbling over trying to figure out how to get information into your setup. And it's really quite simple if you know where to go. So I'm going to show you how all that works. So real quick, Ally is part of the CTC Nexus Suite, and what it's built for is to help educate your users on how things in Revit work in your firm, and also to help you prevent bad practices or bad workflows, bad habits really that people have acquired over the years, maybe from school or from just trying to figure things out on their own. And there's built-in messaging that you can customize to assist with that, whether it's a flat out no, you can't touch it, or hey, this isn't really what we want to do here, but I'm going to allow it, or hey, we've spent a lot of time with these door families, please read this documentation before making any additional changes, kind of thing, right? So we can go ahead and start tailoring that a little bit more, and you can freely customize that how you need to, and then it monitors everything, right? So there's logs created so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on without having to be standing over someone's shoulder watching them work. It allows you to kind of be in more places at the same time without actually being in those places. Kind of slick. So let's just do it. I'm not a PowerPoint guy. And so in my Revit file, I've already got some rules set up, and I'll show you that here in a moment. But the way it's going to work when you're ideally, when you have things set up, is in a project, an end user will try to do some things, just day-to-day stuff. Like maybe they got to move some things around, and they try to pin or unpin something. They get a message stating that, hey, in this case, it's very generic, like you just unpinned something. And maybe you didn't mean to unpin that, or maybe you shouldn't have unpinned that, and it was an accidental thing, or there's a lot of different reasons for this, right? So you can either, in this case, the user can continue and allow the unpin to happen, or they could have hit cancel, which would have taken them a step back and not unpinned anything. And that's just kind of a basic, hey, remember, careful. My message was extra generic there, so it wasn't the greatest thing. But let's say that if I try to edit a door type, for example, if I go edit type, and now the bin, here's a better example of a message that maybe you would present. Bin management wants you to carefully consider actions before editing your door types. Or maybe another one is, hey, we've checked out the local intranet here at this particular section for this document that explains why or how edits should be made, and maybe even by whom edits should be made. But at this point, we're giving the user a choice to either take a step back and rethink what they're doing, or just continue on, right? So we're not preventing anyone from doing things at this point. We're just saying, hey, think about it. Other commands that are available, and then you could prevent things from happening altogether. For example, creating view templates from the current view, right? I suppose I still could continue at this point. Things that we don't normally want people doing. Editing project positions and locations, right? Here's a different style of that message. I get a passphrase I can type in. This is something you can keep close to you, so that you're not everybody can do this sort of thing. So maybe only your BIM management team has these passwords, and they're the only ones that can type in that override in the event that the base point actually does need to get moved, or we do need to relocate the project or acquire shared coordinates from a model. At this point, though, if you don't have the passphrase, all you can do is hit cancel. So we've got some things that can happen here, and this is kind of the end user experience at its core. Right? So now the setup itself happens in the portal. Everything other than the user interaction that you saw is in the portal. So when you log into your CTC web portal for your account, we're looking at the standards tab for everything. The standards tab is going to allow you to set everything up for your ally rules and rule sets. And is it a command? Is it an object? Is it for certain projects? Is it for everybody in my company, or just a handful of users? You get to control over who is being or who's receiving these messages. And it's all going to be right here on the project rule set tab, if you will. And I've got one rule set created currently, and this rule set right now is only dealing with commands for the entire organization or everyone in my firm, right? This applies to every user, every project, including admins. And I'm an org administrator and logged in as myself in my Revit session. I get the rules too. I have to deal with this as well, based off the current setup. Doesn't have to be that way, but that's currently how I've got it set up. And when you build out all your rule sets, so I'm just going to edit this one real quick. It's very simple. All you need is a title and a description, and then you define the scope. The scope is, how are these rules being applied? Is it to the entire company or the organization? Are they tied to specific projects? And we'll get to that in a minute. or based off a selection of users that are assigned on demand, or is it based off a group of users, similar to how we would add a group of users to have access to a library in CMS? So that's how this is all kind of set up. And once you have that defined, you start creating the rules. And there's a couple of different ways to build out the rules. And we went over this in the intro video. And you can warn people, you can prevent things from happening. And warn is like, it's not so much warn as it is, let's notify or present a message, right? We used warn in our descriptor here, but it's a show message, but allow for the command to happen, if you will. And then you can also log things so that no one gets a message, no one's being prevented, but we're recording that this action took place so that we can get an idea of, is this a common thing that's happening in our firm or in our projects? And is it something that we need to provide further education on, or are we okay? So there's a couple of different ways to go about building out your rules for commands, at least in this case. I don't have anything currently active for objects, but I do have some in my disabled bucket here that I've turned off under my project-based object standards. And I'm just going to edit this real quick just to show you that how this would look, right? So if I wanted to build out a couple of rules for this replacement of dimensions that are in my project or text styles in my project, you can do that. And effectively what we're doing is building out rules that say, well, I guess this one got deleted, so I'm just going to do it real quick just so you see what it looks like. Oh, that's the wrong project, but let's just say text again. Maybe I've got this MSR titles or MSR notes, and those aren't my normal text styles, but 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch Arial are. So I can take this one and tell it to be my 1/8 inch Arial font, add that, and then now I can apply it to a project. And that's kind of how the setup is done. And I should mention, and I'm glad someone just brought this up, for any of the rules to work on a user's machine. And I mentioned this in the intro webinar, but I'm going to mention it again here because it's good to clarify. For any of the rules to work, whether it's organization, project, user, or group, that individual, every single user that you want this to work with, needs to have Nexus Suite installed on the machine and needs to, right? So that's at its minimum, right? So for organizational rules, Nexus Suite needs to be installed. For the user and group-based rules, for users to be affected by rules assigned to a particular individual, they then have to be present in the portal as well. And really, if you're already using our CMS, it makes it a lot easier to set the rest of this up, right? It's all part of the same Nexus Suite bundle. So it's not an extra ad service that you have to go find. If you have Nexus Suite, you've got it. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to build out a couple of rules and show you kind of how this is all set up. We're just going to do it straight from scratch. And I'm first going to build a new rule set, and we're going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to talk project and object-based rules. So first, I'm going to go ahead and define the rule set. Now, what I recommend is to be, well, I guess with the rule set name, it doesn't really matter. But let's do this. I'm going to say Office rules for objects. And because I'm going to make this one specifically a project-based scope. And for a project, organization, it applies to everybody, and you would just set that scope. But for a project, it involves potentially a little bit more setup here. Now, with a project scope, we're actually pulling projects that have been defined on the projects tab. So if you're using the project activity logger to record Revit session data about your models, then you've already got projects set up and you're 2/3 of the way there with this. If you're not using project activity logger, then we need to go back and set something up. So let's go do that. So I'm just going to add this project here for the moment and create it. And not going to add any rules at the moment. So I'm just going to go ahead and update and close. Let's go look at projects real quick. For a project, even if you're not using PAL, for example, you can still build the projects. Because really all the project is name, number, and where the Revit files are being stored, whether it's somewhere on your local server or up in the Autodesk Cloud, BIM 360, ACC, Construction Cloud, whatever you want to call it. I'm still kind of old school, I guess, and call it BIM 360. But when you set your projects up, we only really care about the name and the number and the path. That's it. There's a lot of extra information here for you to fill out if you want that as part of your reporting information, and maybe you are using Project Activity Logger or PAL. Makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and add a project number real quick. And, and the name we'll call sure. Just mix it up a little bit. I always use the same name, so I'm going to change it. There's some other information here that you can use if you desire, specifically like issue date, the phase, contact information for individuals at your firm, any, whatever you may think you may need. But the important piece here after you hit create is making sure that the file path is set up properly. Because that tells not only, Project Activity Logger, but Ally, which file that we're actually taking, monitoring at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and hit add and then browse to, oops, not that way. I'm going to go ahead and just browse to the file I have in my C drive here real quick. And we'll go with this one. If you are using ACC models for this, or BIM 360, docs, whatever you want to call it, the best way to get that path here into the file paths for the project itself is to do this. And this assumes if you've got Project Activity Logger, this makes it really simple because Project Activity Logger is actively looking for paths and logging all of the session data. And all of those paths would then show up as either being mapped or unmapped. So in my case, I know it's already mapped, but if in your case, if it's the first time you've done this, it'll show up under unmapped. You'll go find it. So if I type in ACC, no, maybe if I do cloud. BIM. See, I've already mapped all these. Anyway, let's do this. I got a better one. Auto. There we go. I got a couple. See, and here they're calling it docs. Isn't that great? So in this case, I'm going to grab this particular file and link it to a project. And this will list every single project that is available within your list. And I can go ahead and grab my Lower Town office complex and link it up. So now if I were to go back and open up Revit 25 and open up that model, everything that I do within there now has the ability to be tracked within this. Okay, So if that project is set up this way, just like we did today, just now, when I go to standards and let's edit that rule that I had made for office rules for objects, I should now be able to see that project number in my list. Here it is, 2024-1024.1. And now I can add that. And you can add multiple projects to a rule set. It's not just one project or the next project. So you can build this out based on project type, because chances are healthcare projects versus multifamily housing projects are going to have a different set of rules and different sets of things that can be done to it that you wouldn't do for another project, or certain types of families that you would want to use in one project versus another project, right? Healthcare project's going to have a very explicit set of doors and wall types. Multifamily housing is going to have its own explicit set of doors and wall types, and we want to make sure that we're accommodating those accordingly. And it's very possible that the healthcare group that you're working with will want very explicit textiles potentially and certain other families to be used. So we can go ahead and build out rules to make sure that those instances and entities are being used in the project. All right, so I'm going to update this real quick and show you how to build out some rules for objects. When I go to add rules, I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus sign here. It's a very easy process. It's easy to set up. And the way it works is this. What I recommend doing, and this is purely for a ease, a good visibility on the rules and knowing what's contained within it, and for logging purposes, is to make one task per rule. So hopefully this explains it. So I'm going to build out a rule that says it's an object. If I were doing a command, I would type command here, and then or you can just call it swap, but to me it's easier if you have a key indicator there at the beginning, so that as you're reviewing the logs, you can just look at that very first word and now it's a command rule or an object rule or a swap rule, right? And then what it is that you're doing or what is being affected. Maybe so, like text styles, let's say. Okay, and you can put a description in there to help spell that out if this isn't clear enough. And then we're going to select objects. And in your criteria list here, we get to now specify what objects we're going to manage with this particular rule. So part of the setting up of the rule itself is how much you're going to add to it. Oops, I scrolled too far. I personally think you should do one rule per or one, like I said, one action per rule, and that is not only for ease of understanding what it is that what it's doing, but that actually gives you more control over what's being run at any given time, right? Because I have the ability to control if a rule is active or inactive at any given point. I can do it at the individual rule level here, like this, or I can do it, if I update this and take a step back, I can do it at the rule set level. So if I disable the rule set, everything inside of that rule set gets disabled. But maybe there's a couple of things there that I do actually want to have running, but not all of it. So the more you, I guess, itemize this list, the more flexibility you're going to have down the road for enabling and disabling and when it happens. Now, one of the things I need to point out about this, about how these rules work, I'm going to go ahead and build out a couple of more here. And we're going to do another one for dimensions. But these rules run specifically the object rules, will run upon model open. Okay. Now, so anytime a project file is opened, it's going to kick off these rules if they're active. Now, this can be, depending on how many rules you have and what rules they are and what, what they're working with, this could potentially take a significant amount of time to process, right? If you've ever done large object swaps, right? You grab a bunch of line styles in a project and you try to replace them with different line styles, right? You're going using quick select and trying to update your detail libraries, for example. Or you grab a bunch of groups and you try to switch them over to something else, or elements in a group. That takes time. And the more information that you're manipulating, the longer it's going to take, right? So you just need to be cognizant. And that's part of the reason why I recommend breaking these things out a little bit more and making them more like individual items within the rule set itself, so that, again, you've got that control. You can say, well, I just want to focus on getting my dimensions up to date right now, or today. I'll take care of my textiles next week. Or maybe this project is doing just fine right now. I don't need to have it constantly running every single time we open the project at the beginning of the day. So there's things that just to be cognizant of, and especially that very first time that you run it on a project, it's gonna be slow, because especially if you're running half a dozen rules at it, or maybe you write 24 rules to do this object, your textiles, your dimension styles, your wall types and floor types and door families and various other things. Just be aware. And again, that's exactly why I'm breaking them out the way I'm breaking them out. And you can, you don't have to break it out for each unique individual family. You can have textiles and then map out all your textiles in that list, and that's okay. Same with your dimension styles. Same with door families or wall types, right? Now, one thing I do want to mention that we have here is that maybe you are looking for something explicit. I'm actually going to do walls instead. And objects. And so this is all the way this works for building out these object-based rules is we're looking at a project and looking for the information within that project to help build that rule. So, which means you can synchronize data from your starter projects or your Revit templates, have them available in this list. So you can kind of build out some stuff based off your corporate standards, which is great. But sometimes the elements that you're looking for that need to be updated don't exist or have not made it to the portal yet, right? So we can force that issue at times if you'd like. Or maybe you find a bunch of bad stuff, or I shouldn't say bad, maybe you find a bunch of old stuff and your new standard potentially hasn't made it in there yet. Maybe you updated the textile naming standards. We can synchronize that information up to the portal so that the things show up. And that's what this extra button is next to CMS in your ribbon. So back in Revit, on the CTC Productivity tab, we have this Standards Synchronizer button. This button allows you to take your active Revit model and synchronize it, the project model elements, to the portal, to the cloud. And so there's actually two different things that can be synced up here, and I'll explain what they are. There's two of them: synchronized categories and subcategories, or synchronized project model elements. We, for Ally, are concerned with the synchronizing of project model elements. So that means if I've got a wall type that is not present in the project that I'm trying to source from for when building these rules, but I know that it's in this other project here that I have open, I can push that information up to the cloud so that I can build rules based off that. the synchronizing of categories and subcategories, this is specifically designed to use with the family standards module, also in the portal of CTC Nexus Suite, but that's specifically tied towards using the family standards module to check your CMS libraries and get the categories in line there. So if you're doing both features, you can check them both and let it run. I'm just going to focus on the project model elements right now, and then I'm going to press sync. I've done it already, so I'm just going to do it again. It's okay. That just lets me know that nothing's changed since I last did it. But had I built a new wall type or a new dimension style, I could sync that up just fine. And specifically, well, that wasn't supposed to change on me, but specifically what I'm looking for here is we got a duplicate wall type, and I want to be able to find that. Now, in lieu of syncing, you can always do it a different way. So I'm going to show you how that worked. Wall types. And I can now start looking in this list for my duplicate wall type. Is that the right project? Yep. Oh, no. Did I grab the wrong project? I might have. That makes me look super intelligent. Oh, yeah. I might not be in my ACC model. That might be my problem. Let me just double check that. Anyway, I know which one will work though. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this real quick and hit create just so I have it there, but with my text styles. Oh, I'm moving too fast. I need to slow down. Object, swap, text. All right. If I grab this and text, there we are. So we have the ability to set this up. Now, the one thing I wanted to point out is maybe you have a sneaky suspicion that you have users out there that will be simply duplicating something, whether it's a wall type, a door type, text note, dimension style, any family, stair, railing, what have you, and not updating the names accordingly, right? They just hit edit type, duplicate, hit OK, and now it's, wall type A, number 2, or 1/8" aerial, number 2, right? A lot of people do that just because they're in a pinch. They need to do something quickly, make a quick change. They don't think to rename it properly, or they just think it's temporary, I'll undo it, and then they don't. And then that element is still in the model somewhere, and other people start using it because it's there and it looks right. You can actually jump ahead of that. And if your standard is 1/8" aerial, you can check this box here to do freeform entry and just type it in. You're not limited. So if you think this will happen at some point, you can simply check that box for freeform, type it in exactly how you think it would appear, and then anytime that we find this, when the rule is run, it's going to go ahead and make that change. And I made a huge mistake when I set this up. I just noticed this. You have to remember to put in the family name and type name. It can't just be type name, okay? And you can see here, I used the drop downs to build this. This is my freeform. This is wrong. This is right. So I'm going to actually delete this real quick and really quickly do it again. And this drop down here for the model, this is just where, specifying where that information is coming from to create the rule. The rule itself applies to anything in your scope. It's not applying to this particular project file. So you don't have to worry about that when you're setting this up. So if I do text, it's the family, and then 1/8 inch aerial 2. And then I'll just copy paste this over here. Looks better now. So now I can hit save. So now I've got myself set to do 2 things. Okay. Now, part of this, so that's basically how I would go about setting this stuff up. And then I would build out a set, if you had healthcare rules you wanted to make, that's another rule set. If you had office, or multifamily, that's another rule set. If you had higher ed or lower ed, right? You get the idea. And then anything that would apply to the entire organization, set it up as either in the organization rule. I've got one for commands. I would build another one for objects, or do it break it out in its own separate thing again. Now, when it comes to building out other commands, command-based rules, we haven't talked about this one yet. So I'm going to edit this one since I've got this rule. And here, we've set it up so that it's easy to see, right? So if I look at the logs, I'll know when something is targeted or invoked, I'll see it. Command, and then this one's just logging. So now for managing your work sets. So now I'll know if someone tries to open the work sets editor, I'll know someone did that, right? It's not going to prevent them, or it's not going to tell them anything. It'll be like nothing happened on the user machine. But then I know who's making changes, because maybe we're having issues with work sets being manipulated too much. Same thing. And then we have, so you can build out log-based rules so that it's just tracking stuff. We can also start building out warnings and prevention-based rules. So this is my favorite example. What if you wanted to prevent the deletion of something, like a floor or a roof, or maybe not prevent it, but notify people, right? Early on in the process, right? Things get deleted all the time, right? Because we're changing the design, things are in flux, what have you. But maybe once the project is established and things are going, we shouldn't be deleting floors very often, right? Maybe edit the boundary a bit. Maybe we're changing a finished property or a material, but we're not really deleting anything after a certain stage of the project. But then every now and again, and it always seems to happen, someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, my floors are gone. I don't know what happened." Or, I guess more commonly, the roof's gone. Where did it go? Or my link disappeared. You can build out rules to monitor that, or at the very least, make them stop and think about it for a second. And heck, we could even do a prevent. And just say very, intentional. And then you can actually give out the password phrase. Whatever you want it to be, and then just make sure that is the passphrase that you use. Be a mean little trick to tell them what the passphrase is, and then not give them the passphrase. And now that's a rule. Next time I open up any project, because it's an organization rule, I've got that one in place, right? But we can prevent things, or present a bunch of messages that say, "Hey, remember this thing? Don't do that," or do it this way. You can paste links to directories on your network for more information, or the proper families that should be used. So instead of editing door families, copy paste the link to a location that has maybe manufacturer specific doors that should be used on a particular project, or air terminals that we're using that we downloaded from Price's website, for example, or something along those lines, right? There's various different ways you can tailor this to work at your firm. Now, and what'll happen once you've gotten through and set this up, however elaborate you make this, all of the rules that you generated, whether it's organization, project, I can go back and turn on my user and group-based rules that I've got. I've got a few. I'll just go ahead and turn these on real quick just so our list looks a little bit more robust. When these are all active like this and a user opens Revit, that's when the rules synchronize to their machine, right? It happens upon that Revit session initialization. And that's syncing up the organization-based rules. It's syncing up the user/group-based rules if those apply to that individual. And then it'll sync again when a project gets open. So all of that is, so it happens in kind of two stages here, because we need to, we're not really sure when which project is getting opened. Now, and then that's just kind of how it's going to happen. And so if a particular user is working on a project and they could have rules applied to them from all four scopes, right? We've got the rules for everybody. Maybe they're on that office project that we set up, so now they're getting hit by those rules. Maybe they're in a group of, maybe they're brand new to the firm, and we've got a bunch of messages set up that are intended to be educational type messages, right? We're not preventing them from doing anything, but it's a reminder, hey, we do it this way, go check this document out. Or we do it this way, go look at this video on YouTube. Or, hey, the client wants it done this way, go here to do a thing, right? So there's a lot of different things happening all at once, potentially. And again, then for the objects, just to reiterate this, the objects process, those swaps, whatever rules that happen there, that only happens when the model is opened. So if the rule, whether it's org or project-based rule, when that rule is invoked on a project file, those content updates will happen during the model open. So if you know for a fact that, and I personally, right now, I would, because it can take time, especially if you know it's the first time you've done it, maybe make it an intentional, we're going to make this active to help me update my model, right? I know this model's having some issues. We've got a lot of unnecessary duplicates in here. Let's do something and try to clean it up. This model is getting a little sluggish and causing issues. Build out some rules and then explicitly open that model with those rules enabled. It'll run the updates, almost like running it through Project Processor intentionally, right? You're doing that on purpose to do some model cleanup. You can do that here with Ally, with these project-based object rules. Kind of a slick little workflow and a way to go ahead and do some of that cleanup. And then you can save these rules for another project at a later date. And maybe the rules aren't very, I guess, the objects in those rules, there's not a ton of them, then you can leave it on all the time. Maybe you've got wall types and every now and again there's a duplicate and a half a dozen duplicates made, and they're used maybe 2 or 3 times, and that's fine. That's not going to take you a lot of time at all. It's where the first time you build it, you notice there's some duplicates, you clean them up, and they happen to use it like 500 times in your project. Right now we got to swap 500 wall types or 500 walls to be part of that. That's where the time consumption comes into play. So if it's running all the time and from day 1 of project to day 524 of project, it's going to be constantly running and it's going to be doing constant cleanup. So it's not going to be a performance issue. It just will be that potentially that first time if you're enabling this partway through a project. That's all. Just want to make sure that was clear because I've gotten questions about it in the past. So, yeah, so now that I've done that, right now, if I have to restart my Revit project and go ahead and do all that, so I'm just going to go ahead, or I don't, I guess. I would restart it on this project because this is the project I wanted to. But theoretically, I can open up another project and just, it'll resync the rules and go ahead and run with it. So you don't have to close and restart Revit. You can have multiple sessions open if you choose. Now, some of these aren't, the object ones are going to sync, and I'm doing that on purpose because I don't want my object rules to sync up. But I can still come in here and, you know, make an attempt to delete something or not delete something, and or, you know, try to, you know, manage work sets or something along those lines. So, yeah. So that is, oh, that's a pad. Never mind. It's not a floor. But at this point, I'm just gonna do a quick little summation of this. So real quick, the whole point of all of this is just to help you get a better understanding of how this is getting set up, right? Organization rules or any rule set that you build, be explicit. This will help you with the logs. And actually, I should show you the logs because it's gonna go ahead and spell it out very clearly, and it's easy to see what's happening. Here's the date and time that it's happening. Here's the rule that was invoked and what the action was, or the result of that action. Was it enforced? Was there a bypass? So, and really, and then, you know, what was the target? Is it an object or a command target? So this will give you an idea of who's doing what and when they're doing it. And that's the reason for trying to spell it out. Okay. And then if you have access to your reporting API, or if you've set that up in your firm, there's additional information being logged there that help expand upon the logging abilities. So if you wanted to know, okay, so this object-based command happened on this particular project, and it's associated with this project number, it'll list all that stuff out. So you can do some additional reporting and separation of the information at that time. I just want to point that out because, you know, I've explained setting all this up is important. You know, I mentioned important for logging and reviewing the data. So that's how you can go ahead and do that now. The project logs tab gets you just enough so you know what's happening and when it happened. That API will give you the rest. All right. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you saw some benefit out of this, and hopefully it clarified a few things on how you can get some setup done. And I'll let you guys go. I appreciate y'all. I want to thank you for joining, and look forward to seeing you guys at the next CTC webinar.